for any of us, we don't like bad things happening to us. We don't like being tortured. We don't like being in prison, especially prisons in those countries. But God was above all. God was their God, and they would follow him.
The USSR. It's the largest country in the world.
There were events like those that took place in Rome 19 centuries ago.
Cold War. Information is
Since
power.
Mikhail Gorbachev came to power in the Soviet Union 3 years ago this month, his public statements have been filled with promises to bring a new openness and fundamental economic change to his country.
The first almost half of my life, I lived very sinfully for myself, for just worldly pleasures. And then I got married to a woman who also had a lot of bad things in her background. And she had a son who was living in Minneapolis, was addicted to drugs, alcohol. Came home to our home in Fargo. And while my wife was doing the laundry, he led her to Christ. Then he invited us to go to church with him on Sunday. And we thought, well, he's doing so well, we should humor him. So we did. And God spoke to me through the message, salvation by grace through faith, the whole gospel message. And it was like being struck by lightning. I mean, it just happened just like that, boom. I was in the business world, senior vice president of an international company, slated to become the next president. And everything looked good for us, doing very well financially, beautiful home and all that. But the Lord started speaking to me about making a commitment to serve him. And this was unimaginable to me, and I spent many nights on the living room floor just arguing with God, I can't do that, I can't do that. And finally I got to the point where I said, all right, Lord, by your grace, I will go where you want me to go. I will do what you want me to do, period, No specifics, just however, wherever, forever. And then I thought, well, now I have to share this with my wife. What's she going to think? So I shared it with her, and she said, Al, I've gone through the same thing, I've come to the same conclusion, but I was afraid to tell you. We met a refugee from Romania who had been doing Christian work in Romania, and his life was threatened, and he escaped from Romania and ended up in Fargo, North Dakota, coming to the same church where we had started going. So through him, we learned about the need in Eastern Europe, where the communist governments were trying to eliminate the church, if at all possible. In fact, they supposedly had a chart on the wall that showed how the churches were declining and would eventually disappear. So we started talking with him, and it just seemed like that's what God wanted us to do, to work in Eastern Europe and bring training and teaching and so forth to the people behind the Iron Curtain, as they said.
The hours are long. Soviet officers told us that since they only have the conscripts for 2 years, they have to pack as much training in as possible.
We traveled all over, Hungary, all East European countries, but Romania, Bulgaria, all of those countries. And in the process, we were introduced to a mission organization that was just getting started. As we talked, they said, well, you have business experience, international business experience, and you have been a pastor. We think the job for you would be chief of smuggling operations. There were about 12 organizations working together to provide training materials and teaching for church leaders in those countries, because the government was not allowing them to have such materials. And the one job that they needed filled, they explained their producing 2 million seminary textbooks, and they need to be smuggled into all these countries and all across the Soviet Union and distributed to hundreds of groups, church leader training groups in these countries, all underground, of course. It was, it was the job way beyond what we could do with our little Volkswagen. We enlisted the help of various organizations that were already doing that. We had a team from, I think, about 7 different countries where we had people who would come in and distribute the materials. Again, all around Eastern Europe and all across the whole Soviet Union, 6,000 miles from east to west. So my job then was to plan and recruit and coordinate and record all that so that everybody knew, here's where the books are and they need to go to this group and that group and so forth. And so we would have smuggler distribution people go in. The distribution, of course, had to be done underground as well. My wife and I did some of that ourselves. We typically stayed in campgrounds. If you stayed in a hotel, there were microphones and cameras all over, and they would follow you, to wherever you were going. So we would stay in campgrounds, and then we would scope out contact points during the day so we knew where we needed to go. And then in the dark of night, we would go and make contacts with people, and then they would take us to where the books were stored, and we would, do batches. Then we had a Volvo, like a station wagon at that time. So we would distribute, a few boxes at a time to different groups.
My plea is for your continued help in training.
Christians saw the sovereign God as, he is sovereign over all, sovereign over everything. And to the government officials, they rejected that. They said, we, government officials, we are sovereign over our people, and we tell them what to do. If someone was a Christian, they simply wanted to keep you quiet or get rid of you. In many cases, they would kill people.
When Russia fell to Marxist revolutionaries, it was part of a long continuing struggle between Christian monarchs on the right and atheist republicans on the left.
It is unclear how many people were killed. Some say 3, others say 4. Some say that at least 2 were...
Many of the people we worked with did end up in prison, and they said, they would go from hours and hours of interrogations and torture and the truth serum injections, and some of them served time in prison. So they always knew that was a possibility, but they were very committed, very, very committed. Matthew 10:28, I think it is, that, do not fear those who can kill the body, but fear him who can destroy both body and soul in hell. That was their reality, and they accepted it, because they were serving the sovereign God of all that exists. They had that confidence that even if he allowed bad things to happen, it was for his good purpose. So they didn't let those threats bother them.
From ABC, this is a special edition of World News Tonight with Peter Jennings.
Good evening. We begin, of course, with the shock that was not a complete surprise. The coup in the Soviet Union has been on the minds of many Soviets for many weeks.
(1989, 1990), with all the revolutions overthrowing the communist governments in Eastern Europe and the Soviet Union imploding, we were able to work openly. So I moved from the smuggling role to training role. And I went in one morning to visit with a pastor. And he was sitting at his desk, and he had a map of Latvia spread out on his desk, and he was putting little red stickers all over the map. And I said, "Gennady, what are you doing?" And he looked up at me, he said, I'm planning where we're going to plant the first 50 new churches in Latvia. And I said, well, Gennady, that's great, but do you have men, trained to go out and plant 50 new churches? And he looked up at me with a big grin and he said, no, we don't, but you're going to train them.
In his time, and in a manner no observer of world politics would ever have predicted, God is redirecting history, and we believe it is in answer to the prayers of his church worldwide. Our people are celebrating a freedom that most of us had never experienced in our lives. For the first time in more than a generation, we speak openly, we meet freely, we express our hearts and minds.
I think it was 3 months later we opened the Riga International Bible Institute with students from a number of countries, and that's still, still going. To me, the ultimate purpose of my life is to do things that will last for eternity, and that comes back to seeing people reached with the gospel and discipled and multiplied. So that's my life, to be God's servant in building his eternal kingdom. We officially started serving workers for the harvest January 2022. People are being evangelized, brought to Christ. They're trained in Bible knowledge. They're discipled into Christ-like character, and then they are equipped in ministry to go out and reproduce. That's God's plan, and He's given us the privilege of being numbered among His workers, and we just want to be His servants in serving His workers that are out there in all these places. We are exceedingly thankful for the part that we have had in His work, and our desire is that He would bring more people and increase our ability to reach people.